The DFS Studio is brought to you by DraftKings. Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
Yo, we're back. It's Tuesday, September 24th, here on the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I'm joined, as always, by Matthew, just dadding in the middle of the night bets.
I definitely was last night, the night before, pretty much every night, actually, Kyle. I sent you a couple of funny things I saw on the internet, too. The internet's great. The internet is undefeated.
It's good at its job.
With humor and dad jokes and stuff. So I sent you a couple of those last night at about 2:30 in the morning. So, it's funny. Like, when we had the twins, and you do all that, and you kind of get over, like, the really hard days, you're like, man, I don't know if I could ever do that again. And now, I used to not be able to function on anything less than, like, 7 hours of sleep or 8 hours of sleep. Now I'm like, you give me 5 or 6, I'm ready to go in the morning. I will say, I've had 3 cups of coffee so far today already. So that
you are coming out swinging.
That might have helped my overall, mood right now and my energy levels. But regardless, I'm feeling great. We're on to week 4. What's new with you, man?
So I'm a little jealous of that season because I understand what it's like to not get the same sleep, but I also love weird sleep hours. Like, I actually looked forward to it. I always had little games that I would play. Just things that I could look forward to at 2 or 3 in the morning. So I don't know, like, you get a week's worth of football stuff to digest at 2:30 in the morning, and you get some weird conclusions.
I was mostly watching Jane Daniels highlights and then comparing them to Trevor Lawrence highlights, which there were none of, by the way. So that's where we're at.
That's what we got to do, is just compare the number 2 overall pick to the number 1. Stroud, Young, Daniels, Caleb. This is our obsession as sports fans, is to basically take what has happened, and then look at it in hindsight about 50 million different ways. You're going to find every single person over the next year or two saying, okay, here was the trade. Here's what happened. Here's how the Bears got this. We dunked on the Panthers for a while. We're probably going to end up doing that again for some other teams. Now we're talking about Justin Fields. And there's just so many different paths of hindsight analysis that we can all go to. But Jane Daniels looks so calm and so collected. And they're 2-1. They're killing my bet, by the way.
Oh, yeah. The under 6.5 does not look good, considering, 7.5 point underdog when the line closed last night. You would most likely count that as a loss moving forward. But underdogs this year in the NFL have been crazy. So we thought they might lose this game. They should have lost to the Giants and scored an offensive touchdown. They, of course, lost in week 1. So, in theory, they should be 0-3. But Jane Daniels, I think, is just that dude. I mean, he played so well last night, like literally perfect in every facet, not phased in anything. On 4th down, he immediately is like to the sideline. We're going for it. Like, I love the confidence that he's playing with. So, yeah, if you grabbed him in best ball where he was going, he looks like an absolute steal. The rushing is there. The goal line rush attempts are there. The deep passing is finally there. Thank you, Cliff, for allowing that to happen. No more just screen passes. That looked awesome last night. So lots to be excited about with Jane Daniels. I don't want to overreact to one game because the Bengals defense is truly something special of terrible. But now they play the Cardinals. So I think it'll keep going this week. So if you have some Jane Daniels best ball bags, those look pretty awesome.
Did you know that Austin Eckler, the running back that nobody wanted, this inefficient turd last year, essentially, for fantasy football. Did you know he's leading all running backs in yards per touch?
Good for him, man. Good for him. Unfortunate with the concussion. I don't think he plays this week just because it's the short timeline to recover with 6 days instead of 7. But yeah, good for him, man. I love bounce back stories like that.
Sounds like some B-Rob time. Who, he got the carries. the opportunity was there.
Yeah,
just wasn't selected.
Yeah, for those that are not aware, I'm sure a lot of you are. We had an over on the rushing yards for Brian Robinson. And if you would have told me the game played out exactly like it was, I was like, oh, we would bet this every single time. 16 carries, positive game script. Bengals down both starting defensive tackles, terrible run defense, literally like stuffed at the line every time he touched the ball. So that was pretty ugly. And then the Eckler injury on top of it. So you win some, you lose some. Still a good week in the prop streets and good on the year. So it happens, man. That's betting and that's DFS.
Yeah, it was a great week, I think, for a lot of our listeners, learning the process, talking about cash stuff. So let's just review it.
Straight cash, homie.
I am one of those people that I love the projections. I love looking at weighted opportunities. I love comparing points per dollars. And at the end of the day, it's like, okay, I'm gonna do that. But then there's always a part of me that just goes, God, but in my gut, I don't want to play this player in cash. I can't live with myself if I play this player. And so for me, like I look at running back and I look at opportunities and go, okay, well, at this price point, this player's a good play. Like Rachaad White was that player last year that I just hated playing him. And yet when he was like 6K, 6.2, whatever he was most of the year, it's like, well, we're going to play him because he's the dude. Zach Charbonnet was that guy for me this past week where I looked at what he did the first 2 weeks and how inefficient he was. And I said, I can't play this player. I ended up playing him in cash because the projections were too strong. And because of that, I went off of my love for Chris Olave and I hit the cash line. And that was the only reason I did, just for that reason alone. So I hit the cash line. It was a good week for me. I also was very proud of us in some of our GPP calls. I mean, Dak stacks somehow, or Dak himself got there. Somehow. Betz messaged me after like the first or second quarter. He's like, dude, this looks so bad. And I messaged him back. I'm like, he's going to get the 300-yard bonus, isn't he?
Oh, man.
So Dak somehow came through for people. And then pairing Derrick Henry, I saw a lot of people pairing Derrick Henry with Dak. CD didn't get there. That looked good. And then Saquon was probably my favorite leverage play. I wrote him up. That felt really good as a wipeout pick. I played Saquon and nobody else from that game. And that got me pretty far in some tournaments.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good week for, like, sometimes in tournaments, it feels like obviously every single time you play, you should think about ways to create leverage. You know, which levers are you going to pull to help you do that and help you vault up the leaderboard if certain players fail. But sometimes it feels like you're kind of grasping at straws for plays, and it's like, I don't really feel great about this. This week, there was a ton of GPP plays that we both felt great about. If you would have told me Dak was going to put 30 DraftKings points up and CeeDee Lamb would not be part of that process, I would have been shocked. But apparently you needed to stack Dak with Ferguson and Kevontae Turpin. Who knew? So that was frustrating, but still happy with the process of how he got there. With King Henry, it was such a clear, I thought, pivot in terms of just where he was priced. It was kind of no man's land, right? With like Achane a little bit more expensive, Kamara a little bit more expensive, everybody playing Jordan Mason. If you just kind of pivoted and you got the right game script, which you did with Henry, against Dallas's run defense, which going back to the start of 2023, dead last in success rate allowed. They are just terrible against the run. Would have been a fun outcome to have if CD would have got there. But yeah, it was a really fun week for that. In cash, I landed on, I thought the storyline for cash for me this past weekend was which running backs you're going to play, because there's like too many good plays. I landed on Kamara, Mason, and I can't remember who my third one was. Cam Akers with the injury to Joe Mixon. And, in hindsight, like, I don't know if it's hindsight analysis or if it's just like bad process, but not playing Charbonnet, where we look for running backs who are on the field all the time, going to handle 90+% of their backfield touches. Charbonnet fits the bill in a positive game script. So that was probably a miss from me in terms of that read. But I thought that was the storyline of cash, was just which running backs are you going to play, because there's so many good options. Obviously, some failed, some hit. But that to me was the big take home from cash this week.
If you want a full breakdown, I write a free article on our site, Borg's Cash Review, that goes up every single Monday, walks through the slate and kind of just says, hey, here's our process. I even posted for people just to see, here were our best plays for wide receiver. Here's what Betz and I gave people who are part of the DFS passes. Here's the wide receivers. Here's them in order. Juwan Jennings was on that list. He was our favorite punt play. I did not play him in cash, but I did play him in some home leagues, and he just got destroyed. I mean, just annihilated by him. So I felt really proud, I would say, overall, of our feel for the slate and just being able to look at it and saying, okay, these players make sense in this game environment, or these players are coming in a lot lower than they should be. And we say all the time with Derrick Henry, like, if he's not popular, play him in tournaments. We talked about the Dallas run defense and how bad, and let me give you some numbers. Dallas's defense so far through 3 games has allowed the most rushing touchdowns over the last decade of any defense. The fourth most total rushing yards through 3 games of any defense over the last decade. It's been really bad. On the opposite side, we talked about the Ravens. We're like, man, this isn't the same Ravens defense. I don't know who is just telling you like, oh, we can't play them. It's the Ravens. They've allowed 875 passing yards through 3 games. They allowed 875 last year through 5 games. So it's been really, really bad. So I think you and I identifying some points on the slate where you could take advantage felt really good. Obviously, CD didn't get there. That's the part that was most painful. If you had told me that Dak would throw the ball 50 plus times for 379 yards and CD would be a bust, I mean, that's so painful.
That really did hurt. Oh, man. But hey, it happens. We move on. And yes. I'm happy a lot of people, either won a lot of money with that or like were in contention to win a lot of money with that. Because if you have those plays in that process down and you're close for a couple weeks, like eventually you will come through and you will have an awesome score. So I think the process was really good this week on that.
Yeah, and let's highlight a couple of winners. Every week, we have some awesome listeners that get to post in our Discord. We get to celebrate with you guys. I even saw some people that said like, hey, I've never really won a tournament before, and I came through and won your league, your DFS league for DraftKings. That was awesome. Got sent one this morning from Christopher Cash at Chris Cash Music on Twitter. And man, he had a good night. He played in the Showdown slate. He said that the optimizer is fire. He used the fire emoji, and it helped him. He changed just a couple of settings on there, and he turned $15 bets into $15,000, and he tagged us on it. So, I mean, that's just wild stuff.
Chris, can you please treat Kyle and I to some Chili's with these wings? Oh, that is incredible. Shout out to Chris. I know a lot of people had good lineups on that 2-game Monday night slate, as well as the main slate. Saw some people take down about $1,000. A couple people put up like $500 in winnings. So really love seeing you guys do that. Like for me, I genuinely mean this. Like seeing you guys succeed and win is sometimes more rewarding than like my own success. So I'm so happy for Chris, man. What a night. $15. Hey, honey, I'm going to throw $15 in. You mind? No, not at all. Go ahead. Cool. I just won $15,000. So shout out to Chris. Enjoy it, man. This is a huge win.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, what Betz is saying is in our Discord channel, I feel like overall, the vibes are people that are getting to play with other people that are like-minded. And then over the course of the season, it's like, oh, you're staying in this. Like all the time we preach, like learning the cash process isn't just, are you profitable? Hopefully you are. But it's looking up and saying, I'm still playing in week 10, in week 11. And then you're playing on the Thanksgiving slate and you didn't deposit more money. Like those are the kind of things that we care about. So let's move on. We're going to talk about week 4.
State of the main slate.
Each week, Betz and I refer to the lines on DraftKings Sportsbook. It's where Betz and I play. You can go to sportsbook.draftkings.com. We always check in with a wager. I mentioned earlier my Washington under is looking pretty rough right now. I took the under at 6.5. It was plus money. Not so good right now. Betz, where are you at on a wager?
Yeah, we gave out in the preseason, we do the season-long props. One of the ones we took was the under on Gardner Minshew's touchdown passes, with the idea of, if this doesn't go well, does he get benched? Do they move Devontae in the middle of the year? If they want to be run heavy, all those things. We already have rumblings after week 3 of Antonio Pierce saying we might have a quarterback change. And of course, it's been reported since then that Gardner will start this week. But the fact that they're already kind of like rumbling about that tells you a lot about the state of the team. So I'm loving the under that we have on Gardner. We'll see how that holds up if AOC does get some opportunity to start games.
You think that Gardner? I don't think Gardner's the one making, quote, business decisions.
Oh, what a quote.
As AP was saying. I know you're a big fan, huge fan of Antonio Pierce.
I mean, I definitely like it was super fun last year where that team was just, done. And with McDaniels, like it's so hard to remember what that team was in the first 6 weeks with McDaniels, like a complete joke. You get an adult in the room, they play for him, they love him. Like I love that stuff. But to me, to come out and say that publicly about your team after week 3 of the NFL season is crazy, especially after just an awesome upset of the Ravens a week ago. Like I don't know. That was a little bit to me. And then the fact that he's calling it business decisions when he's punting on 4th and 1 on the opponent's side of the field down a touchdown in week 1. My brother, like, you got to make some business decisions that are better for your team. So, like, I don't know. I just don't have a good vibe on, like, how that's all going. But I loved Antonio Pierce and what he did last year. So that was super fun. I just think the truth on the team and, like, him as head coach is probably somewhere in the middle of where it was last year and where it is right now.
They are 1-point favorites at home against the Browns, who are also a train wreck.
I think they win that game.
The line was Cleveland -1, and then it changed just a bit. I don't know, man. I think that game's just a straight-up pick-em gross fest.
Yeah, we'll talk about the Browns.
I was told to play the Raiders defense in home leagues.
Who told you that?
They said, the internet's told me to do it. They were a good pickup, as they said.
On the waivers.
Oh, man, they have a good matchup this week, the week after. I was supposed to be able to play the Raiders for a while. And
you can play them this week. We're going to talk about the Browns.
Because Watson's a sack machine?
Watson's broken. They have major offensive line issues. I mean, they've got one of the lowest team totals in the slate. Yeah, you can play the Raiders again.
All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. We are here to break down the Week 4 slate for you. And if you got used to this past week, just copy and paste it, because honestly, it's the same exact thing where we have 2 Monday night games. The slate has a little bit more, freedom in some ways. I feel like there's a lot of different ways to go here. There is one game that is above the rest. So I'm wondering how that's going to work with roster percentages. It's too early in the week, but 2 Monday night games shrinks what we're doing. We have bye weeks next week. So there are some teams who will be holding out players because they know, hey, we're not going to risk this, or they're in concussion protocol. They're not going to play. So there is, I would say, a different look and different feel. So how are you handling this slate just from a top-down approach?
Yeah, I think the way you frame that is pretty much what I'm thinking too, where it's like, I'm just kind of going through like the team totals this week and looking at some of the game environments, and it kind of feels like you can start to slowly like cross off a handful of teams here and there. Like, of course, in any tournament, you can convince me of mostly anything because, well, that's DFS. But like, the Patriots here looking rough against the Niners with a 14.8 team total. The Chargers, we'll see on Justin Herbert, but they're taking on a KC team where, I mean, those games just hit the under all the time, especially the Chargers games are 3-0 to the under. So you have quarterback concerns there. You have play volume concerns. We just talked about Cleveland. Like, it's rough. Denver, it's rough. And it's like, man, these game environments are so bad. We've got a bunch in the 38 to 41 range that quickly, like, it does become very obvious, like, where the game environments are. And that is Washington, Arizona, at a 50.5 point total. Arizona favored by 3.5. It's the only 50 point total on the slate. And on top of that, when you look at how the pricing sets up this week, Kyler and Jane Daniels, I think, are going to be like the 2 cash game quarterbacks people play. And we've got Trey McBride injured, which could open up a bunch of value and opportunity there. The pricing came out, of course, before Monday night, and Jane Daniels was just awesome on Monday night. So I think that game is going to be so popular that trying to figure out how to play it smartly in tournaments, I think, is going to be the key.
I think early lines, like every single week, I look at the lines on Monday before the Monday night games. And then you see the public afterwards just kind of lean into what they just saw. So this game is a little fishy at 50.5 because I don't know if you know this, Betz, but if I see a 50-point game, I am running to take the under. It was at 49.5 earlier. It's at 50.5. That's all we ever see anymore. It's just unders across the board. If you just would have blindly bet the under this year, 59%. It's a really good hit rate.
You'd be profitable.
Yeah, and if you did it for 50-point games over the last, year plus, you're at like 70.
You could probably retire.
Why aren't people doing this? I'm okay. I know that I'm kind of joking about this, but like if somebody wanted to do this, we're not giving betting advice about totals. If you just wanted to do this and just blindly keep doing it, see where it leads.
I love the framework there. We're not doing this as advice.
We're not saying this.
But also do this and see what happens. Well done, Kyle. Well done.
I just want to remind people that we want high scores. That's what we want in DFS. We're trying to find the right game environments. And the NFL has rebounded and said, hey, by the way, we have some good defenses. And so we're trying to find the right combination. That's why Washington is awesome, because their defense is the worst in the league still. Dan Quinn did not fix that. And yet their offense has been playing at an awesome rate. Cliff, man, I'm really proud of him.
And we got a Cliff revenge game this week against the Cardinals. So, he's got revenge in his heart.
Oh, there's so much revenge. I mean, we got Andy Dalton revenge game, which, by the way, he doesn't have revenge in his heart at all against the Bengals.
I'm sure he loves that and they love him, so it's nice.
Yes. All right, so the teams with the highest team implied totals. Did you do that? I can't even remember. I'm on this podcast. Don't even remember.
No, I have not yet. But Arizona leads the way at 27 points, Cincinnati at 26, the Texans at 25.8, the Niners 24.8, and the Eagles at 23.8. And I will say with a caveat of I could see that falling off a cliff if we don't get good news on A.J. Brown with the hamstring and Devonta Smith in concussion protocol, and the GOAT, Britton Covey, also out with an injury. So
Britton Covey, by the way, if you don't know, is a player that plays in the NFL for the Eagles, using lots of air quotes here, because his one job, if you didn't watch that Eagles-Falcons game from 2 weeks ago, was to basically erase plays. I think he had 6 catches for 26 yards. He killed the Eagles' EPA. It was just wasting plays when they would throw to him.
In all seriousness, though, if they're without their top 2 guys, Saquon's going to touch the ball a ton. But also, I'm concerned about the play volume and the ability to go back and forth there. They don't really have depth. I mean, they've traded for Jahan Dotson, right? But hasn't amounted to anything. Johnny Wilson's a fun sleeper in Dynasty, but can't really count on him. So Goddard and Saquon would get a ton of touches, but I would just have concerns in that game environment with the Bucs. So we'll see.
Yeah, Johnny Wilson's not a football player. He's a power forward who happens to be playing in the NFL.
That dude is a monster. I think he has the biggest wingspan in NFL history, isn't he?
Mo Ali Cox would love to differ with that.
Okay, I heard something on the broadcast about that, but he's a monster.
Yeah. So Washington, Arizona is going to be the game. It's towering above everything else right now. So do you feel like it's going to be over rostered, just early take? Because that's my first thought.
I don't know if it's going to be over rostered. I just think if you're going to play it for tournaments, you're probably going to need to think about ways to get different or unique with it. Like I said, I think Jaden and Kyler are probably the 2 quote unquote early cash quarterbacks. And whenever that happens, their pass catchers come along for the ride. If McBride misses this game, you could talk yourself into a Michael Wilson, or Greg Dortch is cheap. Obviously, Marv will get a bump in usage. So it's all there in the matchup we want to attack. And then on the other side, like I said, the pricing is a little bit loose. Eckler probably misses this game, so you could talk yourself into Brian Robinson. So I just think when we get roster percentages, we'll have to talk through that in more detail. But the game looks good. It's just, I think if you're going to play it, you want to be smart about how you do it in tournaments, or make sure you're differentiating your lineup, in other spots.
I think Cincinnati at Carolina, I wrote, will be fun. I don't know how much it's going to be rostered, but Cincinnati's been a team that throws, even if it's leading to Joe-and-3 Burrow. You like that one?
Ooh, you were waiting. You had that dialed up. You had that on the tee, ready to go.
I mean, they should bring in their starting quarterback. That's the wildest thing. They haven't put in their QB1 yet this year.
Maybe they will in this game. We'll see.
Yeah, but I think that game is going to be interesting. People are going to look at what Dalton did last week. They're going to look at Deontay Johnson. Carolina was had a 65% neutral pass rate and plus 6% in pass rate over expectation. So it was a different offense than we've seen before. Chuba was a usage monster last week. So I think Chuba is an interesting play at home against a team that's been giving it up on the ground. Apparently they just wanted to stop Brian Robinson for a hot minute. But I think that game's going to be usable. Maybe it's just a correlation play, but Burrow's showing up already as he's too cheap. He was priced before Monday night. I think he's a solid play too. So that game is definitely one I have circled. What about a sneaky game for week 4?
Yeah, and real quick before we move on to that, just for context on how different it was in week 3 for the Panthers. In weeks 1 and 2, they averaged 3.5 yards per play. That's almost impossible to even do in today's game, with 9 first downs per game. And comes Andy Dalton, 24 first downs last week, 6.2 yards per play.
Sad for Bryce.
That's so
genuinely
crazy.
Sad.
So at least we know they're capable of running a functional offense, and against this Cincinnati defense, I think that's going to get the job done. So I'm with you. That game also looks good. I'm going to throw out Minnesota and Green Bay. Now, obviously, the hope here is Jordan Love plays, and I think he will off the MCL sprain. And I think about kind of how this Vikings defense has looked, which it's been awesome. But how do you combat a great pass rush and a defensive coordinator that wants to blitz, get the ball out quick? And when you have a quarterback in Jordan Love, who probably will be limited as far as his mobility is concerned in the first game off this injury, they're going to get the ball out quick and run the football. So I think that game, if things hit, could hit in a really big way, where it's kind of that middle tier. It's like 43.5 points total, but there's a lot of high upside plays in that game. And oh, by the way, Sam Darnold is just playing out of his mind right now. So with Jordan Love back in the lineup, I think that game has more juice than maybe the total suggests.
I'm just going to talk about Jacksonville and Houston because both teams laid absolute duds in week 3. And in DFS, we don't care. We get to move on. We get to look at these teams. And I don't really want to look at the Jaguars because they are just awful to watch other than Brian Thomas. Like I don't like watching them at all. So last year in their games, they had 54 and 45 combined points, and Stroud cooked 280 and 2. In the other game, he had 304, 2, and added another one on the ground. So I think you can go back to Stroud stacks if you want to. Do we know anything about Mixon right now and just like where he's at in his recovery?
So he didn't practice at all last week, which I think is kind of telling as far as where he's at with the injury. I think there's a chance he plays this week, but I would say less than 100%. And if I had to lean early in the week, I would say it's probably one more week of him out. So, and the way that you can attack Jacksonville right now, as we saw with Josh Allen last night, is through the air. They've been down one of their starting safeties, their top corner. Their pass rush has really, not been great. So I think it's a great spot to go right back to Stroud in this matchup against the Jags. So I'm with you.
Which game do you want to be underweight on this next week?
Yeah, I mentioned this a little bit already, but I'm kind of concerned about the Chiefs and the Chargers this week. Even if Justin Herbert plays, Chargers games already are 3-0 to the under. And going back to last year, we've been talking about this. KC is not really covering the spread. Their games hit the under at a pretty high rate. We wanted, and we all kind of thought we would see this downfield explosive passing attack from the Chiefs this year with Xavier Worthy. And of course, Hollywood Brown with the injury hurts this, but with him in the addition and all these things, we thought that would be back. And they're content to run the ball, have a low ADOT, get Rashee Rice on screens, Xavier Worthy on end around, stuff like that it just hasn't happened. And so the way I think this game plays is if you're Harbaugh and the Chargers, what are you going to do with the backup quarterback or a limited Herbert? Run the ball a ton, limit play volume, and hope variance is on your side. So I don't really have a ton of interest in that game outside of maybe Rashee Rice and Cash, but otherwise, this game environment looks pretty gross.
I looked this up. Just 5.4% of Mahomes' attempts this year have gone deep, like 20-plus air yards. That is 32nd out of 33 quarterbacks. Baker's actually been the lowest, which is weird because Baker used to be, last year at least, deep ball thrower only. So, yeah, you're not getting these big explosive plays. He's completed 2 passes of 20-plus air yards so far. And I'm still mad that the Falcons lost that game against the Chiefs. So painful. The Falcons have converted 6 third downs all year. 6 in 3 games.
The good news is usually variance on that will swing back in your favor at some point. But yeah, you can't really win much with that being the case.
Let me let you in on a little secret, my friend.
Okay. Variance
sounds really nice. Things don't really bounce back for some fan bases. They don't go the other way.
I was just broken after years of pain.
I'm broken on our stupid end of game calls. If you watch the game,
the 4th down call at the end. What were your thoughts on that? Because I mean, obviously, I think everybody in the building and everybody watching knew Bijan was going to get the ball, but to go lateral with it, and I don't know. I mean, just go up the middle.
Yeah, especially if they're down 2 offensive linemen that most likely would be out even further. They just wasted, like they were given a gift. There was 3 penalties on the last drive that actually allowed them to move forward.
Yeah.
2nd down, they just give this dud carry to Tyler Algier to waste a play. Oh, man. So close. The Falcons have been in every single game, too, by the way. All 1-possession games. I want to be underweight on the Rams. I'm not thinking about it at all. I'm totally fine. Rams at the Bears. This looks like a stink fest. Stafford under pressure at this point in his career is a terrible, terrible formula. He's 36 in PFF's grade under pressure, and Chicago's defense has allowed the fourth fewest points. Last week, you saw Caleb getting to get there based on volume. Caleb was not great. He just was able to keep throwing and eventually have some opportunities. I did play a lot of Adunze last week, by the way, in tournaments. He was kind of lost in the shuffle. I think he was 4,200. So I felt really good about that call, but I feel like this is a game that I just don't want to be a part of.
I mean, the matchup's good on the Bears side in terms of the secondary for LA. They're giving up an unreal 9.0 yards per pass attempt. I mean, Purdy just covered him up with Juwan Jennings. And no disrespect to Juwan, he was incredible in that game. But nobody expected that, right? So I think somebody on Chicago could get there, but I'm with you. It's been kind of rough in terms of the quarterback play. They cannot run the football. DeAndre Swift is losing work to Roschon Johnson. So, yeah, it's rough there. And then on the Rams side, Sean McVay was awesome in that game as far as his game plan. And he's such a good coach that I think you're going to see a ton of Kyren again. And this game probably doesn't get there from the play volume standpoint. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
I hope Shane Waldron just gets like a talking to from McVay. I hope he just
Shane
gets
Waldron revenge game.
Oh, I think it's McVay just saying, Shane Waldron, I propped you up for years. You are a puppet. You are nothing. He's not a good play caller.
No.
He's not. I say this behind a microphone. All right. Which team are you most confident hits the over of their team implied total this week?
In Andy Dalton, we trust, Kyle. Give me Carolina over 21.5.
Just like
points.
you always thought.
It's so funny. I wrote in the Vegas Report article this week, if you would have told me I'd be highlighting a Carolina Panthers game in the high upside section of my article, and when I look at the totals, I would have said you're lying. But here we are. Over 21.5. It's mostly about just, I think they're going to be a functional offense. I don't think they're going to be as incredible as they were last week, but you get a quarterback under center who at least can run the offense, and you get a defense in Cincinnati that's just reeling. They're 26th in points per game allowed, 28th in EPA per play. They're 29th in quarterback pressures. It's just been ugly defensively, and I think Cincy can fight back on the other side and put up points. So give me the over 21.5 on the Panthers.
I think you can go right back to San Francisco. Their team implied totals at 24. They've hit 24 plus points in every single win since the beginning of 2023. New England can't get off the field. I know that like their makeup and their identity is like defense first, Gerard Mayo, but they've allowed the second most third down conversions in the league. And I think Jordan Mason's going to be a player that we just kind of rinse, repeat, play him again. It's weird for a player that's just slowly risen in price that we just look up every week in DFS and we go, yeah, I'm going to play him again. So
yeah, we'll get to the cash section soon. It's basically the same names as last week.
Same dudes all the time. Or which team most confident hits the under this week?
Yeah, give me the under on Cleveland. We already kind of hinted at just this game environment, and Cleveland is broken. I don't know what the right word is. Deshaun Watson's literally been historically bad when you look at EPA for quarterbacks in Cleveland history, like worse than Brandon Weeden, bad in terms of EPA per play. The Watson's 27th in passer rating, 30th in YPA, averaging 4.8 yards per attempt. I mean, what are we doing? 28th in EPA per dropback, third highest pressure rate seen is Deshaun Watson, and on top of that, they just lost another starting lineman in this past week's game. So they're down multiple O-line starters. Their run game is broken. Their quarterback is lost. And now you get, I think, a motivated Las Vegas team going back home off of a pretty rough performance. So give me the under on 18.5 for Cleveland.
Yep, they've scored 17, 18, and 15. Not so good. I feel like Kevin Stefanski is still a really good coach. Like, I respect him a lot. But they've dealt with a lot of injury. I believe it was Wyatt Teller who's injured right now.
Yes.
So, man, it's been really rough. Their pass rate is at 59%, which is not something you'd usually think from a Browns offense. You usually think, all right, we're going to run the ball. But
Myles Garrett also banged up this past week.
Yeah, but he said both his feet?
Apparently.
Hey, I mean, if you're a dominant pass rusher, you can have both of your feet hurt.
Do you remember? You remember like 2 years ago or whenever it was, 3 years ago, when Carson Wentz was still starting for the Colts? There was a game like, I don't know, week 3, 4, something like that, early in the year. He was on the injury report for like both ankles and like both shoulders or something like that. Like just completely out there as like a stick figure, Mr. Potato Head about to break in half.
Speaking of the Colts, I'm going to take their under. It's at 19.3 right now. They play the Steelers. They're at home. It sounds great. But the way that the Steelers play is ball control. It's kind of something that Arthur Smith did in Atlanta. Remember we had Warren Sharp on the show last year. He talked about like the brand that they want to play. He talked with Arthur Smith is if you control the ball, you can increase variance and actually have fewer plays in the entire game. And I think that's what they want to do. Right now, Colts opponents are possessing the ball 64% of the time. That's the most in the NFL. So Colts defense is broken too, by the way. So many broken tackles. And Pittsburgh defense, their teams against them have gone under their team implied total in all 3 games. So I trust Steelers defense. I trust them to control the ball. We still have to figure out with Najee Harris what's going to happen. I mean, are we going to get a CP week? That's scholars are still trying to figure that out.
Dude, if we get to play Cordell Patterson in the year 2024, in
week 4
in daily fantasy, in week 4, I mean that's a gift right there. So we'll see. Yeah, Najee arm in a sling yesterday. We'll see on that. And then Jalen Warren, we haven't gotten as of our recording the results of the MRI, but he tweaked his knee in this game, so they could be down both starting running backs.
Is he like still loading for this season? That's what it feels like. Is that like he hasn't really gotten started yet?
Who, Warren?
Yes.
Yes, and I don't really want to talk about that because it's not great for the best ball season.
No,
Mark Andrews and Jalen Warren.
I posted a list of, quote, the 0 RB guys. I don't know if you saw that, Betz, where...
I did.
Okay, all I did, I wasn't trying to be mean because we've all drafted them. We have teams that we drafted for best ball, all of those things. But if you drafted RB22, which is DeAndre Swift, your favorite player in the league, player that you said on this podcast many times, maybe the most talented player ever.
Incredible.
No, Betz has said the exact opposite. So RB22 through RB41, that is a monster zone that we would say has been the 0 RB target zone. There's very few players that have been helpful in this area. Even guys that seem like hits, Tony Pollard, Devin Singletary, B-Rob. I guess Zach Moss has been fine. It's also like what you gave up in those areas. It's not just like were these players serviceable, but like in home leagues, you were giving up Chris Godwin and Rashee Rice. Those are the dudes you were giving up, or Kyler.
Yeah.
Those kind of dudes. So it's too early to call this. There's going to be injuries. It's going to look different, but like we'll talk about it on the Dynasty podcast this week. Elite running backs have felt even more elite this year. And the Eagles, the only way the Eagles are 2-1 is Saquon Barkley.
I love it. It's so fun. As a Penn State guy, my brother-in-law is a diehard Giants fan, so we just text every Sunday. Like he's like, I'm dead inside watching this. So it's fun. I love it.
A Giants fan. I'm just going through what that would feel like.
Much like a Falcons fan.
Well, I mean, they have wins,
but also no hope.
They have Super Bowl.
So.
Yeah. Man. All right. Moving on.
Salary standouts.
That's where my empathy gets me into trouble, where I'm like, oh, what would it be like to be a Browns fan or, whatever. And I start going there and I'm like, God, that sounds terrible. But I'm sure people do that with my team. Still love my team, by the way.
At least the Falcons give you like a glimmer of hope where it's like, oh, we could actually pull this off. You know they're not going to, but they could. That keeps you coming back.
Hope is a dangerous thing.
Yeah.
I can tell you that. Yeah. Shout out to Shawshank Redemption. Maybe one of my favorite movies of all time, but it could be the best of things, but it's also, drive a man crazy if you keep hoping in those things. So week 4, we're going to talk about our salary standouts. It's Tuesday. Please, please, please hold these with open hands, knowing that information changes. We'll talk about it on Friday, give you our cash locks, but this is just to give you a lay of the land. We mentioned earlier at quarterback, Kyler at 6.8, Jaden Daniels at 6.5. I've been calling him Jaden Money. Those are the two dudes. That's the game environment. It's going to be really hard to not play those guys. And I was thinking about this for cash because last week our top quarterbacks were Hurts and Murray, and they were both duds for the most part. Like they didn't play great games. It was gross, but you didn't get hurt because you still had some production on the ground that was able to make up for it. And Hurts obviously had the broken Dallas Goedert massive play to get over the 300-yard bonus. Thank you, Lord. That was nice. But when you get quarterbacks like Derek Carr, because I saw a lot of people playing Derek Carr in cash, you open yourself up to a lot of variance if the game goes south, because he's not going to do anything on the ground. And if the passing game wasn't working, that game is just going to turn into a dud. Where Dak was the player that would go, they're going to throw a ton. So at least with Dak, you know you're going to have crazy volume. With these quarterbacks, you know you're going to have rushing production.
For sure. Yeah. Kyler's been running a ton. Jane Daniels, I mentioned, he was crazy in week 1 with like 88 yards and the 2 rushing scores. But now, even if he is backing off that a little, and it's not like he's going to, but 40 rushing yards last night is a passing touchdown. Like, that's super helpful. But we know he has the ceiling in the rushing production as well, and the goal line carries that, the zone reads and stuff like that it's really hard to pass on, especially against this Arizona defense. So yeah, both guys look awesome. Kyler at 6,800, Jane Daniels 6,500. Over on FanDuel, those guys are priced up, but FanDuel's a little bit looser pricing. You can still get both guys. They're both just above 8K over there.
I will say Burrow is interesting at 6.6 as a pivot off those two guys. We did just get news literally as we're recording this that Bengals offensive tackle Trent Brown is now going to require surgery. He'll be out for the year. I don't know if that really changes much, because all we're just looking for with Burrow is just pure volume, pass rate over expectations. So Burrow is somebody just to circle, and we'll kind of figure out what the offense looks like at Carolina. All right, give me running back, because I have Jordan Mason. He's now at 6.7. It's against New England. I mentioned earlier their team implied total. They are 10-point home favorites. I feel like it's just something you just stay with.
Yeah, I'm with you. The game environment itself doesn't look great, but their team total is still plenty good. And like you said, they're at home and they're favored. So generally that's what we look for with running backs. So I'm with you in that aspect. Brian Robinson is interesting at 6,100 if Eckler does indeed miss. On top of that, Zach Moss a little cheaper, 5,900 against Carolina. Obviously a run defense you can attack, but with Moss, it was super interesting to see him used a ton through the air as well last night in that game script. So 5 catches on top of 12 carries, in the 5K range at running back is kind of tough to pass on. So I think he's interesting. I think in that same game, Chuba is interesting at 5,700. So there's a lot of strong plays when you talk about point per dollar opportunities in the low 6K and upper 5K range.
Yeah, I like Chuba. I like Chuba more than Moss. You saw a little bit more work for Chase Brown, which was annoying because he didn't do anything the first 2 weeks. But they're both interesting. I still have Cam Akers circled if Mixon misses. 5.3 at home against the Jaguars. The Texans, I want to make sure that I have this correct. The Texans team implied total has risen. Now I have it at 25.8. So that's pretty healthy if you are a 6-point home favorite against the Jaguars team that stinks. So do we just need to forget about Cam Akers last week? Because I played him too, and he scored almost 10 points, which didn't hurt you because most of the field was playing him. But if he's available and it mixes out, I feel like he's back in the pool.
Maybe. I mean, last week at 4,700, he was so cheap.
Kicking him out?
He's not free this week. I mean, he can still come to the pool party. Don't get me wrong. But he's not necessarily at the top of the list. He's the last guy in. 43% of the snaps for running back that you want to play is not great. 12 total opportunities. Kind of got lucky with the receiving touchdown. So I think he kind of luck boxed his way to get there last week. And like you said, you mentioned it positively. You're like, he almost got 10 points. Really proud of you, buddy. Almost got 10 points there. So we'll just have to wait and see on that. But yeah, I'm not as in love with it as I was last week. And when again, he was 4,700. He's not free this week.
It was in a Goomba Wale game. A Goomba Wale script. Dude, what a guy. I respect him a ton. He's their backup kicker too.
That's so fun. Was that last year that happened?
Yeah. He's the man. So those are the cheaper guys. And the guys I have circled, like Kamara. This is a Falcons thing, but he has always killed the Falcons. Always killed the Falcons. Saints play at Atlanta. I think he's still going to project great at 7.6. And earlier I was looking at just running back usage and which running backs have touched the ball the most per team play. Alvin Kamara, number 1. He's touched the ball on 41% of the Saints plays. So when you look at projected opportunities, it's one thing to say Kamara will get, 13 carries and 5-6 targets. Like, you could just throw that out there. It's another thing to look at the team environment and say, okay, when I start distributing opportunities with the Saints, it's like Olave, Kamara, Shaheed will get some, but he has to be hyper efficient to get there. And Kamara just seems like he's just such a great play. So I'm totally fine with him at 7.6.
I think too, yeah, just in general, it's a good point on the slate. Like, the initial feel is that you probably are spending down a little bit at running back and like maybe one of the 5K guys, one of the 6K guys, and we'll see on flex. But like, that's the range for cash right now, it looks like. So early in the week, my take is probably if you spend up, you're going to get some high ceiling plays at reasonable roster percentage. I mean, Saquon's 8K, but if there's no wide receivers, he's going to touch the ball a ton. Breece Hall always has a ceiling worth chasing, 7,800. So same thing with Kamara. Like, that's kind of the range I think for tournaments that makes a lot of sense.
All right, James Conner, 6.5 at home. If you're not playing Kyler, I feel like I'm going to end up there. We didn't like him at all last week. Like, he wasn't in the conversation at all. In fact, when we highlighted that game, we literally said, I'm not playing James Conner against Detroit in their front, and that looks really good. But now I'm right back. Forget last week. So James Conner, 6.5. As a home favorite against the worst team in the league, it's like, this is going to project awesome.
Yeah, tough to pass on that. He's not exactly like Derrick Henry, but also similar in that, like, home favorite, you want to play him. That's kind of when he eats. So makes a ton of sense to me. We already talked about the team total. They should project to score a bunch this week in that matchup.
All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. We are back. We were just talking about the Cardinals, so we got to talk about Marv here. Marvin Harrison Jr., 7.5 against the Commanders. This is the matchup. Whoever the wide receiver one is, you want to play them against the Commanders. You don't have to overthink it. So there's a range of guys here in the mid sevens that I think I really like, and I want to play them in cash. So Marv at 7.5, your dude, Rashee Rice at 7.4, who the Falcons couldn't stop. Nico at 7.3. He's interesting too. Like, those are the guys that I have circled at the beginning of the week.
Yeah, all three awesome plays, and especially Marv, if there is no Trey McBride with concussion protocol. Yeah, receivers against Washington, man. They are generally very good. Rashee Rice's usage is just insane. And on top of that, the Chargers are down Derwin James in the middle of the field where Rashee Rice will operate a little bit more. That obviously helps him. Nico against the Jaguars makes a ton of sense, especially with Tank Dell banged up a little bit. Chris Godwin, literally every week, Chris Godwin in the mid 6K range.
Every week.
Taking on Philly, who historically has been terrible against slot wide receivers. And then I know it didn't work out last week with Ayuk, but again, if no Debo, obviously no CMC, Kittle we'll see on. The projection will still look very strong against New England.
It never does. It never works out for Brandon Ayuk in 2024.
One of these weeks, man. One of these weeks.
10 targets. You can't argue with that. Deontay Johnson, I feel like, is going to be an early favorite at 5.6. Like, he's going to get a ton of love. I see the Dortch on here again. I talk up the Dortch. He was fine. Didn't really do much. We knew he had a hamstring injury, though.
Yep.
And so that kind of like led us to the end of the week, like, all right, I'm not going to go all in on the Dortch. Christian Kirk, your guy. I mean, the cash fiend himself, 5.2 at Houston. That's his range, man. I feel like that's just like the cash zone.
That's been his price, I think, for about 3 years straight, actually. 5,200, no less. 5,500, no more. Just right in that little sweet spot. Yeah, I mean, he finally had a nice like PPR game last night against the Bills. I just worry about, in general, I mean, the Texans are number one in pressure rate, I think. If they're not number one, they're two. It was the Jets. But Trevor Lawrence against pressure right now is not good. So negative game script, I guess you could talk me into it. I don't love it, though. I mean, for 400 or more, I'm playing Deontay Johnson for sure.
All right, I got to throw this out there for the people. I'm not saying to play him in cash.
I saw the price, too, and it got me intrigued.
Okay. Darnell Mooney. Perhaps you've heard of him.
The Moon Dog.
4.4. The Moon Man himself. Interesting at that price point. Like, would you rather play the Dortch or the Moon Man?
It depends if McBride is in, but Darnell Mooney's been getting a ton of volume. So
And screens?
Yeah. Not just down the field stuff. He's getting manufactured looks as well. So yeah, that's a good price tag for Darnell Mooney.
Some say that he was the key piece you needed in best ball this year.
You need those like 6 for 68s, no touchdowns. That's what you need this year. Kyle's going to be rich.
I do. I did check out some teams, which, by the way, Betz and I will do an episode halfway through. We'll kind of look through our best ball teams, just say what went good, bad, ugly. And then at the end of the year, we'll recap. I was like, all right, you're contributing to the team. That's all I care about. You know, he got the touchdown week 2. All I want is to look at my rosters and go, you did your part. And then I look at some rosters where there's just air balls, just complete air balls. I have a team that made me laugh. K-Dot was my tight end too, because, you know, he's there
obviously
every single week. He has scored 0 points for that team, which is shocking because Jake Ferguson was the other tight end on that team who didn't play for some of it. K-Dot has yet to contribute to that team.
And he just buried you in props last week in pick 6.
I can't believe that I would go against my guy, Cade Otton.
Just when you think you know guy.
I don't know him anymore. I don't even know who Baker is anymore.
Nobody does.
Baker got rocked. Tight end, speaking of, I just wrote gross. It feels like a punt week with McBride potentially out. A lot of other dudes that are not on this slate. We said we don't really want to play Chiefs players, or at least Kelsey, too much. I hate the options this week, man.
It's ugly. Both sites were aggressive with Dallas Goedert in the attempt to price him as if maybe the wide receivers are out. So at 5,100, it's okay on DraftKings. Did you see his price on FanDuel?
No.
He is the tight end 1. I think he's priced at 7,600, I think, on their slate, if I'm not mistaken. Let me double check. Hold on. Yep, 7,500, tight end 1. So that's egregious. But on DraftKings, it's okay. Obviously, that's only if Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown are out. But I will throw out on FanDuel, if you are playing that slate, remember they're including the Sunday night games this year. I guess that's just what they're doing. Kincaid is 6,100 against the Ravens. So he looks awesome over there. As far as DK though, man, I'm with you. It's gross. Like, if Goddard doesn't get the targets, you scroll down a little bit and you're in this no man's land of like Hunter Henry and Zach Ertz, which I guess is fine, and the Muth. And it's just like nobody that you're actually excited to click on. So can I do one of the things that you love the most and throw out the cheapest possible name?
I love it.
You could play, if Trey McBride is out, 2,500, a man named Tip Ryman, the pride of Illinois, is this player. He has caught the same number of passes as your great-grandmother's dog. A solid 0.00 stat line on the year. But he has been playing as the tight end 2 in those sets next to McBride. So I honestly don't know a ton about him from like a college prospect standpoint, but a 2,500 against the Commanders, we've played grosser in our days.
You come to the right person because I have done a deep dive on Tip Raymond.
Oh,
and
please.
Well, when they drafted him, I believe it was the 3rd tight end drafted. Like it was very, very early where they took him. He's a mauler. He's really, really big. He's huge. And so they knew they were going to use him in 2 tight end sets as kind of like the blocking specialist. I want to say he's 6'8".
I'm checking right now. 6'5", according to our site, 6'5", 271.
Okay. I want to say he's like 7'5".
320 pounds.
Oh, in my notes, that's what it is. Clearly, in all of my notes I have for him, plays like he's 6'8".
There you go.
So he's a real person. And I believe he tested off the charts in RAS score. Let me confirm that because this is a fun little deep dive at the end of our podcast.
I mean, he ran a 4.64 at 271 pounds. That's moving for a big guy.
Yeah, I mean this guy's killing it. I'll find it later. Put it this way: he is a player at 2,500, and I think on a week where I'm not worried about other people spending up. That's kind of like the way you play cash. Is you look at these onesie positions and you go, who can hurt me? And I'm not really worried. I mean, I even think Goddard, I'm not worried about Goddard hurting me. He's been very fortunate the last 2 weeks, but I get if he's the only guy at 5.1, think about him as a wide receiver. Like, let's say that Smith is out. I think that's what we would say. How many targets would you safely project for Goddard?
8?
Yeah, at that price point, that's going to look really good.
So you're back in.
Well, I just want to know who I'm punting with this week. Am I punting at tight end or am I punting a wide receiver? And right now, I don't know that wide receiver, but you're going to have to do one of those.
Yeah, true.
So who can I punt with that's not going to hurt me? Gosh, 5.1 is not too bad. We used to be able to play DFS. Okay, this is what I'm going to tell my children one day, that I used to play DFS in a time where I could pay 3.5 for a tight end and feel good about it. But now we're paying the Evan Ingram tax in the 5K range in cash, and I hate it. But you're probably right. I don't like any of the punts. The Muth is fine. Goddard's probably going to project super well. What do you see at defense right now?
Yeah, I like the Raiders. They got called out by their head coach. They go home. They're short favorites at home, taking on a broken quarterback with offensive line issues. Generally sounds like a good recipe for me in terms of a play in DFS. On FanDuel, they are 3,700. That is dirt cheap. Also throw out on FanDuel Houston, taking on Jacksonville Jaguars, who currently look terrible. At 4,100 is a really good tag for a good defense. So those stand out to me across both sites.
I think for a tournament play, I'm interested in the Packers at home. I've done some Sam Darnold soul searching, and my takeaway is that he has the velocity you need to make NFL throws. I still think in the head, he makes poor decisions over and over and over again. So I worry about him imploding. So I think the Packers at home, and the Packers are just a well-coached team. They played really, really well. Somehow they lost the Eagles in week 1. And I think the Packers at 3K feels like a great spot if you want some high turnover. There are some teams, if you want to dip down further in the 2K range, that I think aren't terrible options. So like, for instance, the Broncos are not too bad. They're at 2.5. Where's that other team that I liked? Oh, I don't mind the Panthers at 2.4. If you just want to punt it off a bridge for cash, they're at home. You think that they slow the game down, Chuba Hubbard, and then Joe Burrow, who, like I said, he's not even the best quarterback on his own team. He turns the ball over.
Yeah, it's not the worst idea in the world, especially if people are going to play in tournaments. Burrow, you get leverage there. Before we close the show out, Kyle, I did want to give us some breaking news on, you said it's Raymond or Ryman? How do you say it?
His family and I, we'd have always called it Raymond.
Tip.
But,
okay, we'll just go with Tip. Tip Raymond. 9.93 RAS out of 10. So I think he's guaranteed to smash this week.
What is his weight listed as?
271.
I mean, that is huge. I just found my notes that I had from when he got drafted. And, you know, in the NFL draft, they give like little, like, you know, plays the game the right way. It just has all these like poise, accuracy. That's like the Bo Nix kind of stuff.
Buzzwords,
they throw out there. What do you see under here for our boy Tip? What's his first thing they say about him?
I saw the exact same graphic I was trying to find as you. The first word, mauler, physical yak. My favorite part of this, limited production.
Sounds like a cash game tied in to me.
Tip.
He's a mauler.
Take us home, baby.
Yeah. So should be good. If you want to play with us, go to ballersdfs.com. It will direct you to our DraftKings League, Fantasy Footballers DFS, Borg and Betz. Betz, you will probably get some contests going for this Thursday night, which is Dallas at New York, the Giants. You're also going to have a Thursday night article written up that people can get those picks. I'm going to go all in on this Thursday. I've been playing a little less showdown, but I am just ready to get hurt by Daniel Jones lineups here and there. CeeDee Lamb hurt me last week. He can't hurt me again. So, yeah, should be good. Betz, sign us off.
Yes, sir. Thursday night should be fun. We get to play some Malik Neighbors, who's been incredible. So look for that in the DFS Pass, and then Kyle and I are back on Friday to preview the main slate. We'll get more news on T. McBee. Maybe it's Tip Raymond week. We'll see you guys then. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at thefantasyfootballers.com.